This episode of TRXL is supported by Avail. Avail helps AECO firms better manage, organize, and navigate information faster. Visit getavail.com today. This episode of TRXL is supported by Confluence, which is now more than a conference. It's also a video podcast where AEC industry software developers take us behind the scenes and share their design and decision-making process to show how they made the tools we all use to design the built environment. It's available on YouTube and Spotify. Follow the link in the show notes and subscribe today. Welcome to the TRXL podcast. This is Evan TRXL. In this episode, I welcome Japhy Walton to the podcast. Japhy is an applications specialist at McNeel & Associates. And at McNeel, Japhy uses his wide range of AEC experiences of over 25 years to help users navigate the uncharted waters of cross-platform integrations. In this episode, we discuss his journey in AEC and how that plays a role at what he does at McNeel, the ongoing development of Grasshopper and Rhino.Inside.Revit, which is the meat of this conversation, the evolution of their relationship with Autodesk, the importance of user input and feedback, the improvements in tools for architects coming in the upcoming Rhino version 8 release, and other topics. And so, without further ado, I bring you my wide-ranging conversation with Japhy Walton. Japhy, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you.
Thank you.
This is going to be a fun conversation because I like talking about Trojan horses, and you got McNeel team has built kind of what I would consider the ultimate Trojan horse here with Rhino Inside. But before we get to Rhino Inside Revit, let's talk about you and how your career progression to get to this point and what you're working on now.
Yeah, certainly. I'll try to keep it kind of short, but it's pretty relevant to the work I do with Rhino.Inside.Revit. I kind of went to I guess you call it the School of Hard Knocks for CAD. I initially started in the 90s for a friend of mine's company called CADco, which is CAD Consultants, which at the time was doing mostly like AutoCAD, MicroStation, red lines for various firms. And so that quickly got me up to speed and doing working in different standards, implementing each firm's standards, and like switching back and forth between softwares on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And the next step of that was kind of going from that 2D world into architectural desktop, which was pretty efficient object modeling, where instead of putting the lines in, we're adding doors, making walls, and ended up getting pretty proficient. They had some great curtain walls, and it was sort of like Revit, but as soon as Revit came along, I thought for sure that like Autodesk was fully behind their product of architectural desktop. And as we know now, I was horribly wrong, and soon saw the error of my ways and started working exclusively in Revit. And around that time, I kind of made some changes in my life, moved states, where I currently reside, Minnesota, and started working at various architecture firms. Started with a small firm in St. Cloud, Minnesota, where we're doing pretty decent projects, multifamily, local stadium, things like that. But then I ended up getting poached by a former CADco client, which was medical architecture. So they were doing emergency departments, programming, stuff like that. I worked with kind of one of the salesman architect, where we would go to various locations, like at the University of Wisconsin. We'd go to their design a new emergency department, little charrette. And my job was to kind of help with the programming and then kind of create a 3D model in Revit that I would render in Max and have a little presentation at the end of the week. That worked out for a few years. It was an amazing experience. I actually got to go to India. They had an India office. I got to train their users there in Revit. Still probably, I guess, one of my core memories. It's a wonderful time. From there, um, I ended up having some children and staying at home and doing some uh, back to kind of the contracting work. Uh, Ended up taking a project at Ellery Beckett, which is now part of AEC Com, where we worked on the Sidra Medical Campus in Qatar, my first big metric project, which is incredible experience. That was still working in 32-bit Revit, so I had to print out the entire set every single week and send it to Qatar. Thousands of project or thousands of pages. So it was like with the 32-bit, you could only print out so many at a time before you had to restart the computer. Lots of fun. But kind of with the downturn, I think it was probably 2010. I was hired by McGrath, which is an architectural metal panel fabricator and installer. So this was my first kind of getting into the actual things that are actually being built. We're working at an architecture firm. A lot of the times you end up working on like 10% that might get built in a few years. So this was definitely a different pace.
Yeah.
And there's a lot different architecture firm. You're pretty much working in the system they have, whereas construction firm, they have a lot more margins and leeway and willingness to take risks to make the productivity get a lot better. And that's where I was kind of first introduced to Rhino and CATIA. And so like my first Rhino experience was working on a spiral staircase where we were getting the scans in, doing it. It was like $1 million staircase where we were trying to get the curved glass, the metal panels, all the trim and everything. And the architect had done it and designed it in Rhino, where they were using just like made the curves, did some sweeps. So after about like 3 months of that, I got the project done, but it was extremely, extremely painful. And my boss asked me for a recommendation on Rhino, and I didn't give it a good recommendation because it wasn't parametric. I had to redraw everything every time, had to unfold it, and it was just kind of back to Revit I went. So as that went along, we ended up doing a project, the MGM Casino at National Harbor, where we were coming in replacing the metal panel contractor at the last minute. So we had 3 months to verify the existing conditions, create over 5,000 panels, and get those installed. So this was breakneck pace. And we had I was really fortunate there because a lot of my coworkers were architectural graduates. They were more the kind of the dorky kind that didn't fit in so well in an architecture firm. So they were in the construction industry, and they knew Grasshopper, and they came up with an unfold script, and that I was able to work in and get those in Grasshopper and get those panels done just out of pure necessity. Once that project was done, I was kind of bitten by the Grasshopper bug, and I kind of felt like I could make the script better. And so I just kind of, I kept going with it. And fortunately I was in that situation where I had that leeway to take that deep dive into Grasshopper and try to make it work. So that was just several years of learning Grasshopper and working in panelization. So it's kind of a little different take than like a computational design, where they're coming up with those forms. I was trying to make those forms reality, and using more of a computational drafter situation.
It's more like deconstruction rather than than form making, right? It's like, taking it down to back to the essentials and kind of rebuilding it so that it's fabricatable is a completely different design problem.
Yeah, and and it gets very complex with the materials and and trying to verify the reality of what's happening on a construction site with what you've received from models from architects.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite a challenge.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
That's not
architects
like
don't
that's
know a lot about material tolerances, right? And
no.
if you're working in chipboard versus metal panels, those are two different worlds when it comes to tolerances, and that's not something that a design intent model addresses in any shape or form. And that's where the shop drawing process comes into play. And in what you're saying is it's even a much higher level than that, because you're building scripts to deconstruct and reconstruct and build the tolerances in so that the machines can cut or weld or do whatever that you're going to be doing in the manufacturing process.
Yeah, and like I said, it gives you a in that construction. There's the margins are huge. Like, and the people that you're serving are the these union labor in the shop, union labor in the field. So if they're working overtime and you have 50 people on site, it
big dollars.
Costs a lot of money. So
yeah,
that's where you're actually given the freedom to use these different softwares to get the job done. Whereas in an architecture firm, they're just kind of, you're billing hours, you're working in the system. So that's I feel very fortunate to have ended up in a place where I could actually kind of go into that rabbit hole where, and granted, taking that step means I got to make it work, which meant sometimes fighting data trees for 18 hours a day.
Right.
I didn't exactly know what I was doing.
Crash course, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, man, you've said so many pieces of software titles there that I remember kind of fondly, I guess, but kind of not, right? I mean, it's been a crazy progression over the last 25 years, but I learned MicroStation too, like back in the day, and they had to transition to architectural desktop, and it was like, wow, you can actually place doors. You don't have to draw doors anymore, and the curtain walls and things like that. And then when Revit came out, it changed the game once again. So it's been a similar road for me as well, but never to the level that you're talking about, where you're actually doing the fabrication level modeling and deconstruction. I've done a little bit of that, but it was never parametric in any way. It was, I worked in an interior retail shop where we did design to fabrication, and we were using Form Z, and I grew up on Form Z because of it being a solid modeler. That was very much kind of in line with my architectural brain. And the surface modeling of early Rhino and even SketchUp was just like, this doesn't work for me, right? I always had to stay, and I always had this thing in my mind that solids were always better than surfaces. And that's because I didn't come from an industrial design background. I came from an architectural background. And even then, I didn't come from a parametric architectural background. I was very much a modernism, postmodernism, streamlined, modern, and international style architecture education. So I just kind of, I think I slot in a little differently than a lot of people out there nowadays, where it's like Grasshopper is part of the curriculum, right? Rhino is a viewer for Grasshopper for more often than anything. And now the work that you're doing is even putting all of that inside of Revit to kind of bridge the gap between design intent and construction documentation, and maybe, I mean, you know more than I do about actually getting to fabrication level drawings.
Yeah.
So
there's, that's where working in the architecture, I didn't have any understanding of the NURBS curves and the surfaces, that like how all that was built. And that's where I kind of struggled at the beginning in Rhino. And then I ended up becoming a Grasshopper user, where I kind of back learned in the Rhino. I learned the Rhino commands from using Grasshopper, like orient, 3-point and stuff. There was,
right.
I learned it backwards, and in that process, there's always that last 5% of the project, even in a Revit project. It's like you're trying to document in Revit, and it's that 10%, or it's like there's something you're trying to do that just Revit's not going to quite get you there this much.
Mm-hmm.
And like when you're in fabrication, you got to take it to that 100%, and there's not too many softwares that can do it. That's where that company was we got heavily involved in CATIA as well. But for me, using Rhino, where it's unconstrained, where I could kind of get in there and manually change something in that last little bit to address that 5% that's you got to get done somehow. But in CATIA, where I don't know how familiar with that, but it's a very structured, very structured. So it's a like kind of like SolidWorks, where it's like a parametric modeler, where you're assigning true parametric the radius of a sphere that, or some part that changes, that'll change the parts around it, chain it together, so it's all locked in. Whereas in Rhino, it's not parametric, so you can actually at the last minute just go change a couple things. And so that ended up being really, really good for that fabrication type work. So
the whole idea of designing by constraints, like the CATIA model, and parent and child relationships between objects, and the way that those things kind of ripple downward. I mean, that is the idea also with Grasshopper, right? Is that you can make a change, then it keeps it parametric all the way through the chain, through the tree, and it recomputes the whole thing. But it's a totally different approach. And I think it's really interesting that you said that you learned Rhino by going backwards, by learning Grasshopper first. I understood the concepts of Rhino because of the modeling that I had done before, but all the commands were different. They all have different names. There's no wall tool in Rhino. There's definitely no parametric kind of wall tool like I was used to using, or even from something like Revit, right? But learning how to build a wall tool in Grasshopper led me down the path of learning how to build geometry walls in Rhino. And so I think it's similar. And I appreciate that you said it that way, because I've never really thought about it that way, but it is kind of the path that I took as well. It was like, I need to write these cool tools for Rhino because maybe they don't exist in Rhino. But then by doing that, you also learn Rhino. So I thought it was pretty interesting.
Yeah. It's so how I kind of ended up with McNeel in that situation. So I was with McGrath for like 11 years and went through the pandemic, got to the end of it, and it just wasn't feeling working with the company anymore. Things had changed, which, like I said, amazing experience. They worked on all these huge monolithic projects, worked on Geary projects and Diller Scofidia and like all these panelizations. Really incredible experience, but it was time for a change. So I started doing some contracting again, working from home. Scott Davidson reached out to me with a paneling plugin for facades. I was like, well, I'm kind of out of that right now, and just kind of doing my own thing. And he's like, well, why don't you come work with us? So did some 6 months trial, just see what the situation was. And I'm very fortunate, and that's how I ended up at McNeel.
Wow. How long have you been there now?
About 2 years. And,
okay.
And a lot of that. So when I was learning all the Grasshopper things, it was going, and a lot of that was figuring out the problems I had, and then also going on the Rhino forum and just helping people, trying to answer questions, trying to figure out their problems. And that's how I learned everything. And then it's such a great community. And it was kind of like, I felt rewarded by it. So I wanted to pay it back. So it was always helpful. So I think it kind of gives a little lesson. It's like, being nice to people on the internet might not be a bad thing. You never know what might happen.
I echo that. I mean, the Rhino forums are a great place. There's definitely some characters in there as well. But overall, I mean, it is a really constructive place to learn ways to do things, right? Because there's always more than one way to do things. And what's interesting to me is it's kind of like a GitHub, where it's like someone will take the original poster's file, right? If it's Grasshopper or Rhino, whatever, and they'll do a thing to it, and somebody else will do it a different way, but they'll post their results too. And then usually the original person ends up picking and choosing pieces out of all of them. But everybody learns by watching that unfold. And I think that is such a cool thing about the Rhino community. The forum online is really active. I just like going back there and just reading through the new updates and reading through the threads, because even if it has nothing to do with architecture, like if it's somebody learning how to build a car with subdivision surfaces, I'll still learn something about the tools that I can then apply back to my domain. And I think that that's just a fascinating, wonderful way to learn how to use a tool to do something.
And it is a community where there's kind of an ebb and flow of people going in and out. You know, back when I first got into it, like Andrew Human was still really active, but it was kind of the same. I think it was kind of the same situation. He started out as a Grasshopper user, ended up learning how to code, ended up learning how to build plugins, ended up helping the whole community as a whole, just on his own as a member of that community. And that's where and he's still around, but he's kind of doing his own thing. He did the WeWork, and so you have all these veterans, and then you have these new people that come in, and you could tell they have the same attitude, and it's great place to be. So.
This episode is made possible with support from Avail. What's one of the most painful aspects of working in Revit today? Well, we all know that as a Revit project grows over time, navigating the information in that project becomes ever more taxing. And when more than one person is working on a project, a new wave of challenges arise. It only gets more difficult throughout the life of a project. Good news, a huge update to Avail Desktop was just released. Version 4.5 introduces several powerful new features designed to improve organizing, searching, and finding information within Avail. New features include channel groups, application mappings, and scope searches. But that's not all. Let's talk about the all-new Project Navigator, a powerful new feature in Avail for Revit 5.1 that extends Revit's native project browser to help navigate the dense information you're forced to endure as your projects grow. For the first time, Avail will connect your active project to your standard library with one unified search box. With Project Navigator, you can easily switch between active projects, see recently viewed Revit elements, search across all Revit project elements, yes, all of them, conveniently search Avail with one click, filter by all the different element types, navigate to sheets and views, legends and schedules, view individual elements contained on sheets and navigate to them, view family types, and more importantly, actually drag and drop them right into your project, view instances of each family type currently being used in the model, and more. To read all about the new features and see a video of them in action, visit getavail.com. There you'll find a features pull-down menu, and you can look at all of the different features, including the new Project Navigator. Once again, that's getavail.com, and look in the bar across the top for that features pull-down menu. Thank you to Avail for supporting this episode of TRXL.
Something that comes up, a theme that comes up a lot on the podcast is like these aha moments that people have. And in this case, when people see what Grasshopper could maybe do, it's like, I have to look at this, right? And that's what you see a lot of new users start up, and in the forum, and they post something like, how do I make this work? Because this is my first project in Grasshopper, right? And that just kind of lights a fire that is really fun to watch people build on top of that.
Like, just like anything, it's like a progressive refinement of your workflows. The first time you do anything, it's going to be a rough draft. So it's kind of watching how other people make really simple definitions. One of my favorite users is HS Kim, this Korean architect who just makes these gorgeous, simple E = MC² type Grasshopper definitions that are just amazing. And those are the kind of, like you get to that from a big spaghetti that can actually be done in just like this little couple snippets. And
That's cool.
That's where it really gets good.
So how now? Tell the story of kind of bridging the gap now between your Grasshopper use as a really kind of dedicated technician of Grasshopper, I would assume, and then Rhino Inside, so that we have Grasshopper inside Rhino inside of Revit. How did that, because obviously Revit, Grasshopper, Rhino at this point, and now all of these worlds converge in the last few years and building out an incredible tool set. So maybe you can kind of take us through how all that happened.
Yeah. So, I was definitely an early adopter as soon as it came out, because as a user, and that's where I was active on the forum right away. So I like the development was Scott Davidson, that development team, Kike and Asan, creator of PyRevit, initially. So getting into there, like right away when I learned quickly, like, because we still don't have like curtain wall components, like some like a curtain grid, for instance. So I was like, oh, I'm joining the team, I can get everything I want. It's like I can get the still 2 years later, we don't have a curtain wall component because the development of the development and the actual user expectations, they take a while. So there's its own kind of progressive refinement that the people developing need to do. So it was learning more the Revit API, because you like to be able to work in Rhino inside Revit. You're in a Grasshopper environment, but it's essentially doing Revit API calls where, yes, you don't have to know coding to do it, but you still have to understand how Revit works, how Grasshopper works, maybe even how referencing things from Rhino. So it's the combination of all of those where you're creating a particular workflow that works for the users. So having people come with the questions that generate the new components that create the workflow that is going to be hopefully applicable to other people's as well. So that's kind of where it's how it's grown is these user inputs. And then, like I said, sometimes even something that might seem simple from a user standpoint, it's like, I just want to be able to place a grid point with our element tracking. And that's a little more difficult when there's multiple layers going on underneath of trying to, because there is still a little bit of an interface of that Grasshopper puts in that's different than like a Dynamo like interaction with Revit. So there's that element tracking and everything. So everything has to work within the Revit environment and also that Grasshopper user environment. So
yeah, it's interesting to think about how much of a power user you kind of need to be, and this really is a tool set for really technical users, right? This is not a tool set for, like my wife uses Revit all the time. She would never even think about opening Dynamo, let alone installing Rhino inside and getting into Grasshopper, right? I think we all know users who, like you mentioned Andrew Human and Human UI, where it actually pulled some of the Grasshopper interface back into Rhino because they were never going to open Grasshopper, right? And so even on the Rhino side, obviously there's a whole spectrum of users that are going to use the software, where you talked about the dorky, the nerdy folks, like they're the ones who are in Grasshopper. They can, it's like the Matrix. They can see the graph and they can kind of understand what it's going to do. And there's the other ones who are like, no, I literally need to see the model because I only speak in pictures. I don't speak in code or visual programming. This Rhino Inside Revit takes that to another level, right? It's like you are running multiple layers deep of UI to flow data from one place to another. And like you said, you might even be flowing it from Rhino into Grasshopper and then back into Revit, referencing it Grasshopper and then pushing that out into Revit as Revit native elements. And that gets complicated fast, right? So yeah, I can imagine. But at the same time, it's like you're making it so that elements don't have to be modeled again inside of Revit. I mean, I guess maybe you can just take a step back with the whole goal of Rhino inside Revit and just talk about it from that before we dive deeper into any of these subjects, because there's a lot of things you can't do in Revit. I assume that's really the reason why people really push for the development of this. And obviously knowing a tool like Rhino and not having to figure out other weird ways of doing things in Revit as workarounds or whatever to create the geometry you want. If you already know a tool, it'd be great if I could just bring that stuff in. And forever, interoperability has been on the table as like one of the highest things that people want when it comes to these tools. And that never happened. And now you've built this tool to actually put those models directly inside, put the modeling application directly inside the other application, let alone the models themselves.
Yeah, I mean, and initially the Rhino Inside Revit started out with, I think they were just seeing if they could do it, kind of as a lark, that's like, look at us. But it's incredibly useful. So that's the goal, is to be able to make that a tool, and then McNeel thought it was neat enough that they would actually pick up the building of those components, whereas we have Rhino inside Tekla, which Tekla's, their internal department has done their implementation, and which is an incredible thing, and it's different than Rhino inside Revit. It's not, it works totally different. So we're very, very limited by the Rhino API, how to interact, it's a transactional database. So like, you're kind of phasing in and out between being an active in Revit and being active in Grasshopper. So it's definitely more complex from that standpoint as a tool building platform. But that's where we want to continue to go. Is it's going to be user driven, and one of the big asks right now is that kind of UI for simpler interaction. So where a higher level person can develop their Grasshopper script, have that human UI component or something similar, where the users pick your Revit elements, pick your walls, blink, 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 and do something. So that's definitely going to be a part of the future coming up. One of the things that Asan brings to the table, because you'll notice that, like, okay, Rhino inside Revit's not really like Revit at all. All right, there's a UI, and it doesn't work like that. But now Asan has actually been working in the new GH1 types that are coming to Grasshopper. That are so he's actually working on the script editor that will kind of tie a lot of these things together and hopefully get more kind of modular, kind of Asanified, I guess, where it's more like Revit, where you can create your own tools that are going to be able to distribute to other people, things like that. As nice. We're also just still kind of adding in additional components for like electrical MEP type components, the curtain wall stuff like that. It's just kind of keeping up with the users. A lot of our users are these big projects. They're working on massive, either for whatever reason, they're working in gigabyte size Revit projects. Either either because there's a lot of geometry or just because they're massive. So that's where having like the variety of users is incredible, because it could be from somebody that's working in just doing electrical drawings to like a Foster's and Partner that wants to take like Rhino geometry and bring it into Revit quickly. So it's all over the board of what people are asking for. So.
Yeah. I can only imagine what that's like, because even just thinking about Revit, you could have an architect doing single family residential, something very small, to the most massive projects, right? Where you've got lots of models all coordinated via the cloud and lots of different consultants playing in there. And man, it gets complicated fast. I'm curious what your guys' stance is on Dynamo, since I assume there's a lot of crossover, but then there's also kind of complementary tools. Obviously, Dynamo has hooks into everything. Do you have as many hooks into everything as Dynamo does? What's your view on that whole side of it? Because we haven't talked about Dynamo too much.
The Dynamo, I haven't spent a lot of time in. I did a couple like keynote kind of things with Dynamo at one point back when I was working with McGrath. A lot of people are kind of crossover users. And so I do hear about their issues with Dynamo, the DLL hell that they go through. And I see a lot of really positive things as far as how they're answering that question of like, I want to be able to just share my scripts, which for Dynamo includes different packages, dependencies.
Right.
And they're getting better with that, where you can kind of package them up and have it in a little UI that shows up, and they just push a couple buttons. Mm-hmm. But the bottom line is you still have to have a power Dynamo user that has full understanding of what's going on in Revit, and that can make those tools and get them out there. But yeah, it's I think any of these workflows, I'm just a big fan of the graphical interface, the graphical programming. So it's not, I was thinking about this the other day, is whether if Grasshopper really hadn't came out, because the Grasshopper one, it's been out a while. And it was just kind of a development platform. They didn't really know what was going to happen with it. So it's not like you pay extra for Grasshopper. Never have, never will. And that kind of kickstarted. It wasn't the first graphical program like thing like that, but what would have happened if Grasshopper wasn't around? You know, would a Dynamo even came about? Would have been something different than it is now, because it is still like a separate from Autodesk as far as it's an open source thing, which is great. But yeah, I kind of wonder what would have happened if Grasshopper wasn't around. Like, would Dynamo even be a thing? I don't know.
We'll have to ask Ian, the father of Dynamo, and see what his answer is to that. Yeah, that's cool. So you've mentioned Rhino.Inside.TRXL. What else is Rhino.Inside used in as far as other host applications?
Well, those are the big ones. There's a lot of kind of examples out there. There's Rhino.Inside AutoCAD, but that's going to be up to somebody else to kind of take the ball and run with. There's been a Rhino.Inside Bentley, a couple attempts on that, where there. So as far as big applications, I think we're in enough of them, but it's going to be where we don't know those APIs. So it's like we're diving into a situation where we've gotten into the Revit one where you had to, but ideally it's going to be developed by the people who know the program, who know the workflows. And that's where, that's kind of been what McNeel does. It's a development platform. That's where the Grasshopper has started out really basic, and everybody built upon it. There's a lot of stuff that's not in Grasshopper. There's no access to blocks. There's no a lot of fundamental Rhino stuff isn't in Grasshopper. All that was kind of added in by people's workflows. That's changing now a little bit. So we're adding that stuff into that next version of Rhino. The Rhino 8 has all the new Grasshopper 1 data types, but it's still up to people with their knowledge of the software, knowledge of their workflows to come up with new Rhino Inside implementations.
This episode is made possible with support from Confluence. If you've been listening to the TRXL podcast, you've heard of our next sponsor for this episode, Confluence. But we have something new to announce. Confluence is now more than invite-only live events. It's now also a podcast. And it's very cool, if I do say so myself, because it's a joint collaboration between me here at TRXL and Randall Stevens of Avail, who is the creator of Confluence, as well as having been on this podcast a couple of times talking about the AEC tech industry that we all love. So who's the show for? Well, have you ever written software? Or wondered why the software you use works the way it does? Or want to find out how the people who make the software in our industry do their work? Then this is the show for you. I like to describe the Confluence podcast as the director's commentary track for AEC industry software, because in each episode, we go behind the scenes of AEC software development and talk directly with the developer to dissect a feature and their workflows and get an inside view of how and why they made the decisions they did while creating the software you use. Randall describes it as the AEC industry software version of the How I Built This podcast, which we are both huge fans of. Confluence is a visual show in which our guests show their work. We think you're really going to like it, and we already have a few episodes out for you to watch. You can find it on YouTube and Spotify right now. Just search for Confluence Podcast on those platforms, or click the direct links I've put in the show notes for this episode. Go check it out, and please subscribe. No, really, just go check it out and subscribe right now. This episode will still be here when you get back. My thanks to Confluence for supporting this episode of the TRXL podcast.
I think I've seen something about Rhino.Inside.XL and Rhino.Inside Illustrator, and those were maybe, I don't know, proof of concept, or maybe they're being developed. I think it's fascinating to apply it to completely different models, like mental models, I guess what I'm thinking of when it's like manipulating data inside, a spreadsheet from Rhino via Grasshopper or whatever, and also in Illustrator, using it to draw things that turn into two-dimensional illustration, Bezier curves and whatnot. That's pretty fascinating. It just opens a door to people, if they're already familiar with this powerful tool, Grasshopper, that they can leverage that understanding to manipulate data, whether it's lines or actual, numbers, in another program. I think is just super interesting. It brings a completely different perspective to those programs.
Yeah, it really does. And I think the Illustrator is going to get some traction for sure, because there are a lot of Illustrator users, and having that interaction is going to be really good. Like I said, I think the XL is probably just going to sit there as an example. There's new stuff. I think they just added Python into Excel, so there's going to be, once you start getting these ability to where those programs are starting to say, hey, we can send this info and talk to each other a little bit on an outside program, the more that happens, the better. And that's kind of going back to what Asan's come up with. We're gonna have Python 3, and then be able to that just opens up so much as far as connectivity between everything. So,
is it your goal to build components in Revit Inside that kind of match as many tools as possible? I kind of assume this maybe just a dumb question because we should assume that, but your goal is to build as many different tools into Rhino Inside and Grasshopper as there are in Revit so that people can control every kind of element. I'm sure there's some limitations there, but
that would be thousands of
yeah, right.
It's that, and that's where it's kind of, we need to, like, the people's workflows that people are doing. So we're covering a lot of the basics, but I don't know. The Revit API is incredibly complex, and then when you start getting into the particular the granular of MEP or granular of plumbing or electrical or the mechanical ducts, or even the curtain wall things. Each path is a little different. So it's like the more generalized the components can be, the better, or else you're ended up making individual components for each of the separate kind of workflows. So that's where making it easier for people to make their own, just a little tool that they could have, either like with a Python or a little script that will supplement their particular workflow. If it's something that we can easily put in there, like a component that can be kind of generalized, it's more likely to get added as a native component. But,
well, I don't think there's hope for this, Japhy, but please build a stair tool and a handrail tool. Nicholas Catelier from Revit Pure recently posted some images on LinkedIn and probably Instagram or something of like understanding stairs and understanding railings. And it's incredible how many pieces there are to those tools. Just, it's kind of unfathomable. And those are the tools everyone hates to use because you never get what you want out of them. Like, people who understand those tools can have a career in Revit stairs because they're that deep.
So yeah, and making that into something that you could work programmatically with, like in a Grasshopper environment, you're still kind of, you got to string to get things together. Like maybe because you're, instead of the UI, you actually have to figure out something in code wise to make that work.
Right.
And so that's a great example of how you would have to make a ton of components just to get one little particular workflow that you could do really easy in a UI.
Right. Yeah, I can't imagine.
Yeah. But like the situation with these large projects where people, those are the ones that take 45 minutes to open. Then they have to go to this spot to change one thing. And like, they're working in molasses, probably because somebody imported a couple bad families and they don't know how, they don't have a clean file and but they got deadlines and everything's in, just a thick soup, where they can open
ignoring those warnings, right?
Yeah. And we're having it where they can open up Rhino Inside Revit, have a script ready they can push the button, sit there, maybe wait 30 minutes and have it do the work for them. Has been extremely valuable for a lot of people.
Yeah, I bet. You were talking about Illustrator earlier, and it reminded me of an old workflow that I've used and also seen a lot in school. And I think there's a lot of really interesting development and ideas for how to use this software happening in the educational environment, right? Because there's no restrictions on the projects, right? It's not, and I mean, there's time restrictions, but there's no like idea restrictions. And so I remember this tool in Illustrator called Scriptographer. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
It was a way to build patterns. And so the workflow is basically like unfold your geometry in Rhino, so you're flattening that out. Then you're saving that out as basically an Illustrator readable vector file, building your pattern using Scriptographer in Illustrator. So if you wanted, variations of circles, it's stuff you can do now in Grasshopper, but back then it was way easier just to build a pattern in Illustrator, take that geometry, bring it back into Rhino, apply it across your base surface, and then using like flow along surface, pushing it up onto your building. And it was just really cool stuff like that, where I could see now, if you can link these tools together and you're just streaming the data back and forth, there's some really powerful things that you can do in a tool like Illustrator that you could probably draw faster than you could come up with a graph to describe how to do that inside of Grasshopper. Maybe if you can just link these things together, I could just see some really interesting potential happening.
Well,
and again,
and
like this whole idea of a Trojan horse of the Rhino inside is such a powerful idea.
And that's where everybody's coming up with these connectors. The Autodesk connectors came out recently. They're still working on those. I helped them with some of their beta demo videos where they're going from Rhino to Revit and using this new connector platform. There's also other people developing the Rhino, different kind of Rhino connections, using Rhino Inside Revit to create less Grasshopper reliant ones, like Conveyor,
right?
With Nate
Miller. Yeah.
There's MKS Beam, which is a really good one as well. And then like Adaptive Parts Environment, the Ape plugin, which is they're actually making it where your Grasshopper script values will be sliders in Revit. So it takes the Grasshopper part away and gives a distributable workflow that somebody else in the company can use. So that, I mean, there's a lot of connection going on that's just besides the Rhino Inside, but they're using the Rhino Inside as well in that case.
Yeah, Nate Miller was just on the podcast. His episode isn't out yet, but by the time this one's out, that one will have been out. And he said that Rhino Inside like opened up a ton of possibilities for them to build tools like Conveyor. Conveyor was around, I think, before Rhino Inside, but it was like once Rhino Inside happened, it just turbocharged what was possible with their tool.
And yeah, we need those. Just for that primary reason, they're making it. It's a little more constrained. So it's telling the user, hey, everything needs to be on these layers, kind of standardization, but it makes it more distributable for the whole company versus just the specialists.
Right. Absolutely.
Those as well.
That's very cool. What are we missing here? What else is there going on with Rhino Inside development that you want to talk about?
Well, I think kind of getting into where it's going is the Rhino 8 is, like I said before, Grasshopper doesn't have the blocks, native block components and all that. That's where people like the people at Front made Elefront, which is like, it's such an amazing, like it changed everything for me. A lot of that kind of workflow is getting put in natively. Elefront is still going to be relevant, but that's all getting added into native Grasshopper components where you'll be able to interact with Rhino a little easier, as well as what Hassan's doing with the script editor. And these are still being worked on. So definitely don't go out and download everything right now and expect it to be right into a workflow. But that's going to have a big impact on the Rhino Inside Revit as far as expanding, making the workflows easier, getting it where you can share these your Grasshopper scripts with other people, package them up, just send one file over to a user that's going to have all the dependencies. Say if you're using a Elefront plugin or Pufferfish or one of the other crazy named plugins, that it's going to take it with it and people can share it, because currently that's not really a feasible workflow without education.
Right.
So that's going to change everything, and that's where my focus is. going to be learning and helping on the development of those tools, because that's it's going to take. They're still being worked on, and then it's also going to educate people how that workflow is going to work. So.
Awesome. I'm thrilled with the work that's come out of this. It's an incredible thing. Not enough people know about it, so I'm glad you're talking about it here on this show. I think there's a lot of people who maybe even think that it's just opening up Pandora's box and they don't want to get into it because they've got project deadlines. But I mean, is there anywhere people can go to kind of get an introduction to Rhino Inside that exists on the McNeel site somewhere, or where's the best place to learn about this kind of stuff?
If you Google Rhino.Inside.Revit, the Rhino.Inside.Revit main landing page will be hopefully the first result, which is going to be the Rhino.Inside.Revit guide. And this was initially put together by Asan and Scott and the team. So some of it's a little older. I've been adding on to it as we go. That is going to give you you're going to learn more about Revit than you ever wanted to know. Because that kind of breaks down like how Revit works. So that's where getting into the guide, seeing what's possible, seeing how Revit works on a programming level, that Revit API, and how that relates to our components, you're going to learn a lot if you don't know about Revit. If you aren't as familiar with Grasshopper, that's a different story. There's a lot of educators out there now trying to do Grasshopper classes. Like I said, that one issue is kind of when people say think of Grasshopper, especially in the architecture world, they immediately think of like some wavy shell shape that's being panelized, and that's what a lot of the tutorials are geared to. But there's also a very, very pragmatic side to Grasshopper.
Absolutely.
And that's something I'm trying to figure out how to teach people more of, and kind of get that kind of workflow where, no, you don't have to have a big spaghetti, massive, one single Grasshopper definition. You can have a bunch of small things that do really particular workflows that aren't too difficult to go back into 5 months later and understand.
Right.
If I do a big definition going back 3 months later, I have to sit there and figure out what I did.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Getting it where, the kind of more people understand Grasshopper, not only for that complex computational design, but more of a kind of a computational drafter situation, which is going to tie right into Revit and Rhino. So
Brian Ringley, he's been on the show a couple times. I remember I think it was an AU, so Autodesk University class back a long time ago, 2016, 2017, something like that. A long time ago. He
works for the robots.
He works at Boston Dynamics now. Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
And he was a big time Grasshopper user. He was at Woods Baggett and WeWork with Andrew Human as well. And he had a slide in one of his presentations. It was like what people think Grasshopper is good at. And it was like making weird shapes. Right. And then it was like the list of what it's actually good at. And it was like a lot of really practical things. And then at the very end, it was making weird shapes fabricatable, right? So the thing that you actually used it for when you were doing your metal panel work before. And so there is that perception for sure. And that exists. And it's hardcore because it's probably instilled starting in the educational side, and it works its way up from there all the way through corporate leadership in large architectural firms. So yeah, it is good at that. And at the same time, like that is what it's perceived as doing. And it's also good at so many other things. There's so much low hanging fruit when it comes to building a Grasshopper script that just does something that you should not do anymore. like manually. I mean, just automate it with a Grasshopper script. It's absolutely incredible. There was something I wanted to ask you about just the relationship with Autodesk. You said that they've got these new data connectors, and that's haven't fully read through what that's all about. Maybe you could explain what those are, and then just talk about what that working relationship has been like. Because I think in the past, or at least the perception even with that, is that it's a little adversarial, or was adversarial, because these are competing at some level, but at the same time, it's like different tools for the job, the best tool for the job, a workflow. There's all of these other things at play in the profession. So maybe you can just speak to what's going on there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, they let us go to Autodesk University last year, so we had a booth.
I like how you stated that. They let us there.
Well, I know they didn't let TestFit in last year.
Correct. Right.
I heard that as well. Back in the good graces. So essentially, we're in a good relationship. With the development teams. There's if they have any questions, they contact us. We have questions, we contact them. It's not a big issue. I think where it could go off the rails is if some of the upper management sees as a threat of some sort, and then they're just kind of cut everybody off. Mm-hmm. But the relationship at like the developer level and their people is great. The connector, we're going to Autodesk University again this year as well. The connectors they're still pretty early. So right now they're kind of getting the APS, the parameter service. So the goal, the way I see the big goal is I think it's called manufacturer informed design. That's going to be their Forge API, which will connect their like inventor with somebody who's making, we'll say, chairs. Mm-hmm. Can come up with a chair specification that has a certain amount of flexibility. The Revit family would be created off of that specification. The inventor would also be able to use that work. When the manufacturer changed their design or change something, that change would flow through to wherever products they're going to. I think that's the overall goal. And the connectors are kind of a big part of that with their parameter service. So that's where they're trying to make it so that you can because even talking back and forth in between Autodesk products can be an issue. Mm. They're trying to get those where they can have a parameter means height in Revit, can mean height in Inventor, and it would actually come as a user text in Rhino that would say height. And be able to go back and forth with that information. The geometry is pretty limited. They're essentially just shooting out direct shapes, kind of like, for instance, a wall. Revit wall has multiple layers. You could have at high level detail, you could have multiple materials and multiple layers on that wall. Mm-hmm. When their connector is pretty much just going to be a flat box with some material, like the top level properties. So it's not very granular. It's not very edible, but they are getting specific geometry back and forth between. So I think working on a large kind of BIM coordination level where they're trying to communicate with subcontractors that only need a little chunk of the building. They don't have Revit maybe, or they don't have the whole suite. They're not proficient. They can just send them a little chunk of the model that they could open up and be able to update that in their in the Autodesk Construction Cloud. So how that relationship is going to continue to evolve is pretty much going to be up to them. We're not a threat. We're not a BIM software. We're not necessarily huge or in those markets. So it's yeah, as long as they'll have us around, we'll show up. So
Yeah, I'm interested to see how that develops as well. And just to bring it back to Rhino and the version 8, I've been using version 8 WIP quite a bit. And man, it's for architects. I just want to put a plug out there. The tools that are coming into Rhino 8 for architects specifically, just with the push-pull stuff. I mean, and I would also say the rendering as well is beautiful. It's absolutely wonderful work, and it's so great. It's like, this is like one of those times where I actually want to say, finally, like these tools are here. They're amazing. They're absolutely just a true joy to use. I can't imagine using an older version once this comes out. It's going to be a game changer for architects at the most basic level of just building models.
Well, and Rhino is such a used in such a variety of industries, right?
Yeah.
So and we don't make it so you have to upgrade. So if
Right.
somebody has a process that's working in Rhino 5, as long as the computer is going to support the software, because we're not making any updates to Windows 12 or 13, they'll be able to continue to do that process. And so with Rhino 8, it's probably going to come out here in the next couple of months. It's still like the core Rhino is really getting really solid. They got the, like you said, the cycles renderings in there, the push pull, all that. Some of the peripheral things such as Rhino.Inside.Revit, and some of the Grasshopper stuff is still going to be an ongoing development, because as we get more users, so that's going to be there's going to be definitely a little bit of growing pains there in the first couple months. I'm actually going to be giving a couple workshops, one in Chicago in October, and then New York with the AEC Tech, trying to introduce some of that to some of the hardcore users.
Nice.
And that'll be my first kind of real test of the new workflows. So
yeah. I'm really excited about version 8 and the tools that are coming, just to build models, and not even talking about the Grasshopper side of things, which I know is getting better as well. I'm thrilled, and I'm even using it on a Mac, so the user interface kind of parity with Windows, or getting closer at least, and the stuff that's going on there is really, really great. And the native graphics support for the Metal APIs on the M1 or M2 Macs it's great. I mean, I'm using it on a tiny laptop, and it just flies. It's really fast. So
and that was tough to support with this, like on the Rhino 7, because we knew the Rhino 8 was going to be totally native on the Mac. And like, so it's like having to tell Rhino 7 users are like, hey, I've got this big massive model and it's really sluggish and it's not performing. It's like, oh, it's coming soon. It's coming soon. So now we finally have a really, really good Mac, the best Mac environment possible, coming with Rhino. So that is exciting.
That's cool.
And yeah, McNeel's a little different. So it's like we don't do any like real marketing or anything like that. It's up to the users to talk about it. So that's having things that people can brag about, such as that performance or the new features, is great. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll put links to everything that we've talked about in this. I'll put link to follow you on LinkedIn and wherever else people can find. Is there anything else that we've missed here in this conversation?
No, we didn't have to talk about AI or anything.
There's things that were intentionally left out of this conversation.
No. Just it's all built on user input, user questions, user requests. So asking questions, especially in the Rhino.Inside.Revit, that's where I learn. That's how I learn, is like, solving problems that normally I wouldn't have to solve, because So we rely on that input from people. So if anybody has any questions, they could reach out to me, either message me privately on the forum or wherever you find me. So
Great. Well, Japhy, thank you so much for this conversation. It's been great.
Thanks for the invite. I wouldn't mind coming back in maybe a year and see where it's going to be a lot different. I think, and once Rhino 8's out for a solid year and Rhino.Inside.Revit, it's going to look different. So,
nice.
So we should talk
All right.
again.
Let's do it. All right. Cool. Thanks. Thanks to our sponsors, and thanks to our members this week. Find out how you can become a member at trxl.co, and I'll talk to you again next week.